Our movie today opens with a newly married couple, Paul and Bea, arriving at Bea's family cabin to spend their honeymoon in. We see the couple are very much so in love and can't wait to be with each other all alone in the woods, and Bea shows them around the home, but Paul gets frisky and immediately takes her to the bedroom because he wanted to have some fun. Their lovely honeymoon continues the next morning as they make breakfast together, but Paul accidentally makes a joke about her womb and they get into an awkward conversation about when they should have kids. Later that day, Bea takes Paul to the lake and shows him around with the family boat, and they then go back to the cabin for more sexy time, and later they go to a local restaurant for lunch, but when they enter the place, they find the owner Will breaking lamps. Will then sees them and lashes out at them, telling them to go out of his restaurant immediately, and the couple, feeling confused, try and go back out, but Will recognizes Bea and stops them. He tells her that he is her childhood friend, and she also recognizes him, and the two hug deeply and talk about life. Paul watches them awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Then they all get interrupted by Will's wife Annie, who looks distressed, and she then tells Paul and Bea to leave immediately, so Paul and Bea just go back to their home. Paul and Bea then talk about what they witnessed today as they lie on their beds, and Paul thinks that maybe Will is abusing Annie, seeing the way she looked and acted, but since they had no proof, they decide to let it go and just fornicate with each other. The next day, he wakes up super early to catch some fish for breakfast, but when he walks outside, it was still very dark, and he then checks his phone to see that it's still the middle of the night, so he thinks his alarm just went off early and goes back into the cabin, finds it empty, and he first thinks that Bea is in the bathroom, but that was empty too, and he then calls her, but again there was no answer, and this scares Paul and he starts looking for Bea everywhere in the house, but he doesn't find her. He then goes outside and starts looking around the home, and he goes deeper into the woods and finds Bea fully naked and standing frozen. Paul then puts on his jacket on her and carries her back to the cabin. He asks her what happened, but she tells him that she was just sleepwalking, probably due to stress, but this is suspicious to Paul as she's never had a history of sleepwalking, so he asks her if she wants to go to a doctor, but she tells him that she's okay and goes back to bed. In the morning, Paul wakes up from his bed alone and then finds Bea in the kitchen making French toast, but she forgets to butter the bread and burns it, and Paul asks her how she forgot to make the butter, but she tells him that she thought she did, and then tells him that she made coffee for him too, but when he pours it, only hot water comes out. After having their breakfast, they go out to the lake again, and Paul then tries to make a joke about a story that she told him, but Bea just ignores him. She then asks him to swim with her and just jumps in the extremely cold and kind of dirty water, and when they return home shortly after, Paul asks her why she jumped in the water, but she just tells him that she thought it was fun and just walks away from the conversation. Paul follows her to the living room and asks her again if there was something wrong, but she apologizes and tells him that she's been feeling stressed and that was the reason why she was acting a little weird. They then make up and start taking off each other's clothes for another fun time, but Paul notices some kind of an insect bite on her thighs, and she tells him that it's a mosquito, but he knows that the bites were too big to come from a mosquito. She then tells him that she's tired and goes to the bedroom to take a nap. Paul, extremely confused and suspicious, goes back to the woods, and he looks around the area he found Bea last night and finds her nightgown teared up with a white sticky fluid over it, and he also finds a footprint of someone other than Bea. He then returns home to talk to her, but he sees her in the bathroom talking to herself in the mirror, and she was acting like she was talking to another person. He then returns to the living room, and when Bea comes in, he acts like he didn't see anything. Later that night, the couple spend some more romantic time sitting in front of the campfire, and as they return home, they start playing a board game which quickly turns into them kissing. Paul tries to initiate sex, but Bea sees him and tells him the exact same thing that she said in the bathroom, which was that she has a massive headache and that she took some pills, and Paul thinks that she's trying not to do anything with him as he saw her practice this exact excuse. He then asks her to wear her sexy nightgown, but she tells him that it's back in her suitcase because it was dirty. Paul doesn't confront her, but when they go to their bedroom, he fakes being asleep to see what Bea is doing, and we then see Bea getting out of bed as soon as she thought Paul was asleep, and she walks out of the bedroom. He then gets up shortly after, but when he reaches the door, she returns back, and he asks her where she went, and she responds by saying that she just got up to grab a glass of water, but she didn't really return with any water. The two then go back to their bed, but Paul couldn't fall asleep, and he sees a flashing light coming through the window, and he then immediately grabs his rifle and goes outside to see where the light is coming from. He then sees someone running, so he shoots his rifle in the air as a warning, which also wakes Bea. He then tells her about what he saw, but she dismisses it by saying that it must be the moonlight that he saw, and Paul is now more suspicious of her, and he brings out her teared up nightgown and directly asks her if she went out to meet Will, and he suspected this because Will was her childhood boyfriend and that she met him in secret to cheat on him, but she responds by saying that he's acting crazy, and they get into a huge fight. The next morning, we see Bea writing her name, Paul's name, and her address in her diary, and she then closes it as soon as Paul comes into the bedroom. The morning generally goes awkward for the newlyweds, then Bea brings a drink for Paul to break the silence, but that also doesn't work as he notices the bite on her thighs are bigger, and he again accuses her of lying to him, which gets them into another argument. Later that day, Bea goes to the boat to fish alone, but Paul joins her, and he then tells her that he wants them to leave the cabin and go back to the city. He tells her nothing feels normal in the place, and she tells him that she wants to spend their honeymoon to the fullest and stop fighting, and they then make up and start kissing, and Paul then goes down her thighs to her nether regions to give her some pleasure, but as he touches her, she starts to bleed from her female area. They then return to the cabin, and Paul tells her that they need to go to the doctor immediately, but she tells him that it was just her period, but Paul knows her cycle and knows that it's not the time for her period, so he tells her to pack her bag and wait for him until he comes back. She then asks him where he's going, but he tells her that he's gonna confront Will since he thinks Will did something to her. He arrives at Will's restaurant, but nobody opens when he knocks the door, and he then sees Annie outside going to the lake, and he then stops her and asks her where Will is, but she tells him that Will is not there, and he then asks her where he can find him, and she tells him that Will is actually hiding. Paul then sees the same kind of bite mark on Annie's thighs as well, and he asks her if Will did that to her, but she tells him that he should just stay away from them, and she then warns him that he's not safe and that they will hurt him if he doesn't go away immediately. She then gets into a boat and leaves in a hurry, leaving Paul with more questions than answers. Paul then starts looking around and finds Will's hat on the lake floating, and the hat has blood on it, so he decides to investigate further and return back to the restaurant. He sees that there is an active camera watching him, so he opens the door to the restaurant and enters the home. And there, he finds a computer which is already playing a security camera footage of Annie following bright light into the woods. He then looks around and finds several pages of notes describing basic details about Annie, including her name and Will's name as well. The computer then shuts down and lights in the home start to flicker, which freaks him out, and he leaves the restaurant to go home, and as he leaves, we see a shadowy figure appearing behind him. He returns home safely and goes to the bathroom to find Bea's diary, and then opens it and sees that she's been writing her name, his name, and their home address, just like Annie did. He then asks Bea who she really is and accuses her of being someone else, and Bea tries to reassure him that she is in fact Bea, but he continues asking her, and he's confused on why Bea needs to write basic information about herself, but she tells him that she doesn't know why she wrote them down. He then goes back to the living room to grab his car keys, but he finds them missing, and he then goes to the bathroom to ask Bea, but she runs into the bathroom and locks herself in, and when Paul breaks down the room and gets inside, he finds her repeatedly stabbing herself in her private area with a toilet bowl cleaner. She then starts bleeding, but she gets up and shouts at Paul to go back to the bedroom, and she then tries to run away again, but Paul grabs her and ties her to the bed. He then starts interrogating her about the details of their relationship, but she couldn't really answer any of the questions as she doesn't remember anything, and when she even tries to answer, she tells him a story that didn't really happen. Bea only remembers her name and his name and that they were married, and Paul doesn't know what to do, so he starts inspecting her body, and he starts from her toes and gets to her thighs, and it leads him to her private area, and then he starts pulling out this large worm-like creature from her body, and she screams as he gets it out. Disgusted, Paul goes to the living room and Bea follows him, and she then reveals that that night she disappeared into the woods, she saw the same light that he saw, and she tells him that she followed the light into the woods and found a group of shadowy figures who forcibly entered her body and impregnated her. Bea then tells him that she's really herself, but that the figures are still in her and that they're taking away what's left of her every day, including her memories, which is why she can't remember anything besides the things that she wrote. Paul then says that he's gonna get her help and scrambles to look for his car keys, but then the bright light appears on the side of her face, and we hear her say that they're gonna kill Paul. She then knocks him out and Paul wakes up in the middle of a boat tied up, and Bea explains that this is protecting him from the figures by hiding him, and she tells him that the only place that the figures can't get to him is underwater. Paul then tries to escape from her and tells her that he will die in the water, but she pushes him off the boat and he sinks. Next we find Bea in the cabin watching her wedding video, and her body is deteriorating as we see her skin peeling off and her eyes are discolored. She's then met by Annie, who has also deteriorated, and the movie ends as they walk into the light together. If you want to watch more creepy horror movie recaps, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. We'll see you next time. Bye.